Welcome back to Local Decision, and thank you for joining us. I'm Rusty Ray. We're joined today by Matt Audette, a candidate for Anoka-Hennepin School Board out of District 4. Matt, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about yourself. Tell us what you're involved in and what your family's involved in the community.
Sure. Well, I'm a veteran. I'm a conservative, and I've been a community leader in a variety of capacities throughout my life. I've been involved in Cub Scouts when my children were younger. I've been involved in the YMCA as a community board member in Coon Rapids. Now as a youth sports coach in a variety of capacities, and now I'm more of just a fan of my children as they participate in high school athletics. I've got two sons that are in high school here in the district.
Pretty involved at the high school in the athletics, you said.
Yeah, they are. It keeps my wife and I hopping all over the place.
And now stepping out and running for school board, it seems like these days school board meetings are tough. And so you're putting yourself up for that. Why now? Why do you want to run for the school board?
Yeah, I think you're right about the school board meetings. I've been to a few of them recently that have been a challenge, I'm sure, if you're in the hot seat. I got interested in school board really over the past year and a half as the pandemic wore on, as our children were put into distance learning. I became active in a Facebook group that was working hard as a group of parents to try to advocate to get our kids back in school. And that group grew to be about 6,000 people. I led the group. We shared information. We tried to support each other and really just try to get our kids, get the district convinced to let kids back in school, which is what we wanted. Over time, we paid more attention to the things going on in school. We all had our children at home, and a lot of parents became concerned with some other issues that they were seeing in the school districts, some social, political type agendas that have found their way into schools pretty deep. And as a concerned parent and as a leader of that group, I began to consider possibly running for the school board. And over time, I made the decision to make a run.
Let's talk about COVID then. Let's start with that. You brought it up, you made the points, and I know that the information that you've shared with us on our website, but you feel like kids need to be in school no matter what, and there's reasons for that. I want you to kind of explain more about your stance on that.
Yeah, you know, without getting into lots of details or arguments about the virus itself, I think what we've all seen is that the virus does behave differently in children, and that school, in-person learning is critical for kids. Kids just don't learn well online. We saw that. We saw that in the results, and we saw that in other ways affect children too. So emotional health, mental health. There were lots of rises in the bad parts of mental health for kids as a result of it. And so the reality is we just needed our kids to be in school despite the fact that the pandemic was going on. There are thousands of people in the community who feel that way, and I feel that way. And now this year, fortunately, kids are in school full time, but the district did announce a mask mandate for children in K through 6. I don't support the mask mandate. I think that that should have been a voluntary measure. I think at this point, all of the measures for COVID should be voluntary. Parents are in a good position now to decide for themselves what's the best way to keep kids safe, and so there's just a need for kids to be in school. It's really important.
So is there a difference between, or do you feel that parents should make the decision about masks, or you feel like masks should not, or kids should not be wearing masks in school?
I think parents should be able to make the decision. And I'm not opposed to people wearing masks or getting vaccines, but I think that it should be a voluntary decision. I think that what the government did over the course of the pandemic to force people to do things wasn't right. Forcing Americans to do anything really is troubling, and in particular during the pandemic. Now, as time has gone on, we've had an opportunity to learn a lot about the virus, and we've had an opportunity to learn a lot about masks. And as we all know, there's lots of different opinions about it. And it's America. People once informed have a right to make their own mind up about these things.
In the information you provided to us, you went on record to say that you don't believe that there should be quarantine periods also for students who've come into contact with a positive case?
Yeah, I don't think that people should be forced into quarantines for those reasons either. I mean, we've got vaccines now readily available, and the bottom line is kids for kids, they just need to be back in school. So if parents assess that their child has been exposed to COVID or that they're sick, certainly they should take appropriate precautions to keep their kids out of school. We should always do that. So, parents shouldn't send sick children to school. But if they're not symptomatic and, they just might possibly have had an exposure, there's really no way to know. So parents can monitor their health. They can do that, along with their doctor and make the decisions as a family.
Several states where COVID is more prevalent, it certainly is a concern to many in Minnesota. It is a prevalent concern, but in other states where schools have been in session longer, it's an even bigger problem, especially the Southeast and places like that. They've had no mask mandates struck down because people are fighting and saying, no, there should be some masking. There should be enforced and there should be masking in schools. So it's all over the map. And in some of those places, they've done studies that say in the schools that do require masks, there have been fewer disruptions to schools. Some schools have shut down because they don't have enough teachers or there's not enough students and they don't have the means to stay open, or there's just too many cases.
Yeah.
So that does cause a disruption. That does cause a large disruption, perhaps even larger than a child staying home for a week or a few days or switching to an online. So there are a lot of, you're right, there are a lot of opinions about that. But you feel as though you speak for literally thousands, you say, of people in the district or even in your community that say that.
Yes, I mean, I'm in contact with, people every day. And during the course of a week as I campaign, it's hundreds of people, and there's a tremendous amount of support for people, who feel this way, that the government was wrong to have taken the steps that they took, especially as the pandemic wore on, and that these type of draconian measures are harmful to society. They're harmful to our kids. They attack our freedoms and liberty in America, and I happen to believe that.
So if one of your sons was in a class next to somebody who had tested positive and was not quarantined or were in close contact with someone because there's no quarantine, and that person or your sons are not wearing a mask, is that concerning to you that they could contract COVID, and not knowing the long-term ramifications of COVID on of people of any age? Is that a concern to you?
It's a concern, but again, as I said, as a parent, what I would be doing is monitoring my child. Just being exposed to somebody doesn't mean you're going to get the virus. So I think that's critical. If somebody has symptoms, clearly, you should behave appropriately. But, I just don't think we can go on forever quarantining ourselves and wearing masks and doing these things. At some point, again, people have had the opportunity to vaccinate and to protect themselves, and again, if people want to wear masks, they certainly can. It's just my feeling that these things should be voluntary. They always should have been voluntary.
What are you mentioned a moment ago with kids at home that you and other parents felt like you were seeing some things in the schools that you were also concerned about that are not related to COVID, but perhaps were highlighted. Talk briefly about what those concerns are.
Yeah, so schools have become, heavily influenced. Maybe you could go beyond influence. They've been, I would almost use the word infiltrated with political agendas, with social justice type agendas. The big one that everybody is talking about right now is something called critical race theory. And, we're seeing it in our school district. The school district has said it's not in the curriculum specifically, but we know that the school district is doing a lot of staff development, staff education on the principles of critical race theory. And, there's debate about critical race theory too. Some people like to use it as a proper noun. Other people sort of use it as a general description of a variety of different things. But in the end, what it is, it's a divisive ideology that's teaching children to be divided based upon their race. It's troubling, and it teaches that our country is inherently flawed, inherently racist, and it has been since the beginning. And people don't want this being taught to their children.
Are you, or have other people provided to you, or can you provide to us an example of this? An example of how that's being taught, or an example of ways that's been applied in what students are learning in, say, history class, probably the most relevant examples.
Yeah, I mean, I had an example on that somebody mentioned online just the other day of a child in a class that was a, you know, it was more of a technology type class. I can't remember if it was architectural design or drafting, but it was, you know, it was strictly based on that, and the teacher, you know, spent class time to teach, you know, some section or a unit of it, you know, things related to systemic racism, you know, whiteness, and these various things. And so parents report this as they're monitoring what their kids are learning, and teachers are being taught how to run an anti-racist classroom, and so they incorporate these ideas just into the general day, right? So we can't learn math anymore without first describing, you know, that getting the right answer to math, you know, might not really be the objective of math, because perhaps based on race, some people can't, you know, can't get an answer to a problem or something. I mean, these things don't make any sense. You know, I mean, this is backwards from where we've been in our country for a long time, and you know, I think that's what's concerning to people. We certainly believe that anybody can achieve, and that we should inspire our kids to strive for excellence in their learning, no matter, you know, all kids, and all kids can do well, and we should encourage them to do well, to be disciplined, to study, and to take school seriously so that they can be successful in life.
And despite the answers that it's provided to parents who have had the question about critical race theory, or perhaps what's been addressed at school board meetings, and even what the district told us when we asked, just so we would understand, and I feel like that we were provided the same answer that they have provided to parents who have had this specific concern. They said, no, it's not a part of curriculum, it's not a part of our training, and you say that that's not the
well,
case.
it's certainly a part of their training. And it feels evasive that they say that, right? So if a parent asks generally, is critical race theory in our school? And the answer is no, we don't have critical race theory in our curriculum. True statement, perhaps, but are we allowing teachers to supplement materials in the classroom with critical race theory? Are we teaching, are we doing staff development that, you know, that teaches teachers how these principles and encourages them to use it, so that when they go and do it, they're teaching the regular curriculum on math, but they go ahead and incorporate these ideas into their classroom. You know, this is how it's finding its way in. And you know, over the summer, the NEA said that they were going to make it a primary objective to install critical race theory in 14,000 school districts across the United States. I believe them when they said they were going to do it. So for our school district, which is the largest in the state of Minnesota, to suggest that that's not going to happen here, I think seems a little naive, if not dishonest.
So as a member of the school board, you would strive to do what in that?
I would support measures taken by the school board to prohibit it from being taught in our school in any capacity. That would include professional development for teachers. That would include curriculum. It would be something that doesn't belong. It's too divisive. It's very political, and it distracts from the learning environment. Racism is a real problem in our society. It's a problem that I would hope nobody wants our society to have. And we need to have real discussions about racism. We need to teach children the whole history of the United States. There's been a lot of talk that people say that if you don't support critical race theory, you don't want to teach children our history. That's crazy. We need to teach all of the history of our country, because there have been bad parts of our history. We did have slavery. We have had systemic racism in the past by law, but those things were overcome, and they were overcome because of our country, because of our Constitution. And as we move forward, we can teach our children how much progress has been made just based upon the history, but we also need to continue to work on it, because we know racism is evil, and evil's here, and unfortunately it may be with us forever. But that doesn't mean that the way that we have to fight it is to try to teach our young children that our country is inherently flawed and systemically racist, and that there are American children who aren't going to have the opportunity to succeed simply because of their race. That's crazy. I can't support teaching children that.
Let's pivot to one more thing before we wrap up, and that is the referendum questions that are on the ballot this time. Two things to renew levies that are paying for keeping class sizes a certain way and resources at a certain level, and continuing what's already there. and also some things with technology, and then adding a levy and an additional tax to help with, they say students may have fallen behind. Obviously, the pandemic is a big part of that, and as you mentioned, it wasn't the same learning just on Zoom as it would be in classroom. Where do you stand with those? What do you look at with those questions in particular, and how the district is looking to address those?
Yeah. So, I mean, as you mentioned, 2 of them are renewals of a levy that was already in place, and the third is an additional one. So I think maybe I'll talk about, you know, the big one first, the first question. I was in the room. I went to the board meetings when the district discussed those, and I think it's probably important for the community to know that these levies are a critical way that the district funds itself, right? So I don't think any candidate would be wise to say, I'll never support a levy, because they're necessary. What was troubling to me about the way that this levy was proposed was that when the administration proposed the levy, they simply talked about it as a continuation, and there was a long, detailed presentation about why it needed to happen. We needed to renew it. And then the choice was sort of presented as, you know, either you renew it or you don't. If you don't renew it, well, there will have to be massive cuts all over the place. Now, I've got a almost 25-year career in business. When we talk budgets in business, there are a few key things we always discuss. How do you determine what the right level of spend is? There wasn't discussion in the board meeting about why that levy couldn't have been less. Perhaps it could have been $5 million less or $10 million less. There was no proposal that showed, here's what it would look like if we spent less money. In addition, there was no proposal of how maybe we should have spent more money. Perhaps it should have been higher. In 10 years, a lot changes in 10 years. The people on the board did not go into detail asking those types of questions. My observation was essentially they accepted what was proposed by the district with very little discussion. And it was disappointing to me because I felt like if we're going to, you know, propose to levy that amount of tax on the community, the board should participate in the development of the levy. They should ask tough questions to ensure that we've got the right spending level, and challenge the district to do more with less, and then evaluate what might happen if we did, and then send the levy forward. So that's not how it worked. If I had been there, I would have done it differently in that regard. I don't know whether we would have landed at the same result or not, but certainly some levy needs to be passed, and you know, at this point, the district has made its proposal for the levy, and as they've said, and it's correct, and it's good that the community will have the opportunity to vote on it.
And then the one that would add additional tax, just real quickly.
Yeah.
Understanding that and seeing a need for that, or?
Well,
otherwise?
so my understanding of what that is right now the district is receiving federal and state dollars, I think, associated with it for COVID relief funds in order to try to supplement some of the mental health and some of the social health and things like that. It's expected that funding will end at the end of this year, so this new levy would allow for the district to be able to continue whatever programs they develop for that. So, you know, it certainly seems like something that is of concern, the mental health, and a lot of parents have stated that they were concerned with it. We don't know yet what the programs are going to look like, you know, I'm not really sure. It's kind of difficult to evaluate that question, but the objective to try to help kids who may have suffered during the pandemic, the objective certainly makes sense.
Okay. Matt, Audette, that's the time we have today.
Alrighty.
We appreciate it very much.
Great. Thanks for having me.